Thank you guys very much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you guys coming out on a Saturday to learn more. You know, we have Bill and Gerald here that are probably some of the smartest people I know about promissory note investing. So I really feel that you guys have a good treat here by learning from these guys. And, you know, the guys that have lost money in notes in the past and learned their hard lessons over their years of experience doing this is the people that, in my opinion, you want to be taking that advice from, so that you don't have to learn the same mistakes they did. You know, and I think with anybody that's seasoned, if you haven't lost money in these types of investments in the past, then you haven't done enough, or you have gotten really lucky, really, or you're lying. One of the two. So, and I think that for anybody in real estate, you'll take your hits as you go through, but the education that you get from taking those hits is going to be far exceed the actual cost to you. It's almost like paying for your own education. And so Gerald and Bill do completely different things in the note field as well. So Gerald a lot of times focuses on the non-performing note side of things, while Bill does a lot more of the creative financing aspect, where he creates deals and creates notes, which I find is very, very intriguing on my side. Gerald's side seems very hard to me, dealing with homeowners and repositioning paper, and also the scariness of the paperwork and, you know, issues that come along with making non-performing paper performing again. So I'd like to start by, and then myself, I create my own paper through seller financing, and I borrow paper all the time, so I understand the general the general rules, how to protect investors on that side, and how all the paperwork works. So, and you can't begin to invest in notes without understanding the underlying paperwork on how to protect yourself and how to protect your investors' money as well if you're raising private capital for those things. So please, before you guys actually go raise money and get involved in notes, make sure that you have a really, really good understanding of that paperwork and how to protect yourself. Don't ever raise money from investors without knowing that side of things, without knowing how they are protected every step of the way. And I would even go as far as to say is, if you ever get into a bad situation where you're raising capital, make sure you personally have the money set aside that you can cover that if something was to happen, because that investor will come back to you over and over again. That being said, I'd like to, perfect, we got our table there for our drinks. Sorry. Perfect. No problem at all. So Gerald, can you start by talking a little bit about what you do on the note side and kind of giving your experience?
Sure. We buy both performing and non-performing notes, first and seconds, around the United States. We like to buy in California, but that's not always possible, so we do a lot of deals outside of California. And we're like a note rehabber. You know, you have property rehabbers that'll buy an ugly house and fix it up and raise the value of it. We do that with notes. We'll buy a lot of non-performing notes and fix them up. You know, work with the homeowner, get them performing again, and get good cash flow off of it, or we'll get a payoff. You know, there's several different options, and you never know how the homeowner is going to respond. Either they're going to want to keep their house, or they say, you know what, I don't even want this house anymore. I'll let it go. You know, you pay me some money, and I'll deed it over to you. So sometimes we get a lump sum payoff, and sometimes we get the monthly payments, cash flow. We primarily, I started buying notes in 2008, and we primarily bought institutional notes, notes that were originated by Wells Fargo or Chase or Citibank or larger lenders. And over the last year and a half or 2 years, we started buying private notes, which were like a seller carryback type note, or someone loaned money to a friend or a family member, and the person quit paying, so we mailed out letters to people and bought a bunch of those notes. And I guess, in a nutshell, I think that's probably what kind of sums it up.
Okay. What about you, Bill?
That's a big nutshell. I buy, sell, and trade paper, which is what notes are also known as. It's a paper business. I buy existing notes. I buy defaulted notes, delinquent notes, There's a difference between defaulted and delinquent. Carl, come sit up here. I know you have trouble hearing, so come closer. I know him, that's why I can talk to him. I know, ambient noise. And so I buy, sell, and trade paper. It's the paper business. I forgot where I left off.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right. I buy, default delinquent paper. Delinquent paper is paper that they just stopped making payments yet. Defaulted means, okay, you haven't made payments. Now we're going to force you to make a decision. Either start making payments or we're going to take the house. So that's we're going to file a notice of default. That tells the whole world nobody's making payments. And I create paper. Or I am in on the creation of the paper. That's what I do. And I've been doing it for a long time. I've been teaching for a long time, too.
Can you give an example on what are the creative strategies you used to create paper in the past?
Certainly. For one instance, oh gosh, which one? I'll choose. I'll choose. Here's a way to find deals, because I also do real estate. Love real estate. Everything that has to do with it. I heard that somewhere earlier. And that is, I just was walking around the neighborhood, and I saw a house that was neglected. It wasn't one that had all the weeds growing, it just was obviously neglected. And so I went and knocked on the door, nothing happened. So I went and knocked on the door next door, asked about the story. There was a little old lady, and she lived there. Her husband had passed away. And so I got the neighbor to introduce me. Got to talking with the woman. She was becoming more frail, and she was becoming a little scared of living by herself. Something might happen. So I engineered I bought the house from. Now, in this deal, I also found a place for her to live. So that's what got me the deal. I found a place for her to live. I bought the house from her. I bought the house from her using seller financing. Okay, so she provided the financing for the deal. I didn't go to a bank. And then, if you look at my hands, he's talking about rehabbing paper. Yeah, this is what you get from rehabbing paper. No calluses.
No cuts.
So I didn't want to rehab the house because it had 35 years of deferred maintenance about it. So I turned around and I sold that property to someone else for a very good deal. They were a family. They wanted to live in the area, father, 2 sons, 3 St. Bernards. And they were looking to rent in the area. Anybody landlord? Would anybody rent to a family with 3 St. Bernards? just one. So they were having trouble. So I knew they were looking for a house, so I offered to sell them this house. Their credit was bad. They had lived in the area. They had moved up when mortgages were easy to get. We call that the meltdown, right? Subprime. And then they lost that house when interest rates adjusted. So they wanted to move back to the neighborhood. Knew the neighborhood was nice. Well, I knew their story. The guy made a lot of money, but they were incredibly in debt and they had bad credit. So I sold it to him. So now I was making payments to the owner, and I was receiving payments, and so I had an income. Right? Now, didn't I say I gave him a really good deal? Why would I give them a good deal? Well, I didn't want to rehab the house. Right? So the deal was, I sold it to them for a very good deal. They rehab the house, and after 10 years, I get 25% of the upside. That's creating paper too. So that's three paper deals in one.
I love that. He had an alternative ending right there that I wasn't expecting. The upside potential associated with the house and getting an equity sharing loan, which is pretty amazing.
Actually, I didn't do that.
Oh, okay.
Option is a piece of paper.
Oh, so you got the option. Okay.
So I have an option on, I can come up with 25% of the value of the property in 10 years, or they can buy me out, or we can extend it. It depends on how I want to do it.
So you had them be able to go improve the property too on top of this and put the money into the property for the rehab.
So I bought it for
it's really
$360. I sold it for $400. It is now worth almost $1 million.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And I worked so hard to
You
that
knocked
increase
on
in
the door
value.
to the neighbor and got an introduction there. You know? That's cool.
So during that term of 25 years, or do you still
25 years?
What did you say at the time?
25%.
10 years.
Oh, 25%. During that time, do you still talk to the purchaser that bought it? Or?
Oh, yes, it's in my neighborhood. I was walking the neighborhood
Oh, okay.
when I saw the property. So I walk by him occasionally, knock on the door, say, how are you doing? How are things going? I believe, and he believes the same way, of relating with the people, maintaining a relationship. Because I also ask him, how are things going? If things are going bad, do you need some more money? Things like that.
Yeah.
Because we may negotiate another deal.
Oh, okay.
Isn't
People's
it
situations change.
easier to make a deal with somebody you already know and trust?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if I make the deal with them, does anybody else have an opportunity to get in there? No.
No, you got it.
Sort of selfish reasons.
And what happens if, they want to go sell their house now and, 10 years has gone by and they got some preventive maintenance they don't have the money for? It'd be great to go get another deed of trust on the property, help them rehab it and resell it and make some money there too. It's kind of interesting. So what about yourself, Gerald? Do you have a story about a deal that you worked on recently?
Yeah, in fact, I just received the wire on Tuesday of this week.
Okay.
So I had when the institutional paper that we were buying kind of dried up the last year or two, the prices went way up. We started mailing out to private lenders, kind of like what Bill has. Bill would get a letter from me because he has a private note, first mortgage, or second mortgage, or third mortgage for that matter. So we mailed out letters. I got a response from a lady that lived up like Diamond Bar, I think it was, and she had loaned a friend of hers $100,000. And the lady quit paying her a long time ago, or never paid her, I don't know what. So we bought the note for $35,000. The total amount owed was about $180. It was a 12% loan. So when you figure in the back interest and the late charges and all that stuff, the arrears, the amount that was tacked on to the principal balance was $180,000. So we bought that note for $35,000 cash. I wrote her a letter. She responded to me. We bought the note, and we met face to face. She filled out the assignment of mortgage or assignment of deed of trust in California, and I handed her a check for $35,000. I contacted the homeowner. It was a house in Irvine up in an area called Quail Hill. And she started making payments to me, $600 a month. So if one of you guys have a calculator, what's $600 a month times 12 is what, $7,200. What's divided by 35,000? Someone have a calculator there handy?
It's about 20%.
About 20%, yeah. So would you be happy with that return? So, but the problem is, after making payments to us for 6 or 9 months, she quit making payments, and then she also quit paying the first mortgage. And this is a $2.5 million house. And my loan was a third mortgage. There was a first and a second, and I had bought a third mortgage. But so when she quit making payments, I put her into foreclosure. I foreclosed on it on October 12th of last year, I mean. And she had an IRS lien for $600,000 and a judgment for $600,000 also. I mean, the judgment was like $580, the IRS lien was like $620, or round numbers. So when I foreclosed on her, I kind of caught her sleeping. She didn't expect me to foreclose that quickly, or she wasn't expecting me to foreclose. But she had quit making payments. She was delinquent on the first mortgage, and it was just getting worse and worse. So I figured, I got to foreclose, take this house, sell it, and make some money off of it. So with the IRS lien, I had to wait 120 days before I could open escrow and sell the property. The IRS has a right of redemption period. So I had to wait the 120 days. So we put it on the market, fixed it up, put it on the market, and sold it. We sold it for $2,550,000. The total debt ahead of me was $2,060,000. So by the time you pay the real estate commissions, closing costs, I just got a wire for $342,000.
On a $35,000 investment? That's awesome.
But we had also spent about another $60,000. So I had $90,000
yeah,
total.
You had to pay for the arrears and all that.
At time.
Right.
Yeah. But it was my money. I didn't have a hard money loan or anything. I didn't have a partner on it. It was just me. But that deal could have gone either way. She could have sat there and just kept making payments to me of $600 a month for a long time. That was interest only. At some point, she would have probably refinanced me out or paid me off in full. But it didn't work out that way. And you never can predict what's going to happen, whether it's going to be a monthly cash flow or a lump sum payment. But we had $90,000 invested in it. We got a check for $340,000, so that's a $250,000 profit in about a year. But that's exception. That's not typical. I have losers also I can tell you about. So like Matt was saying earlier. So that just happened we just happened to hit a home run on that one. But
it's interesting, because of the first mortgage not getting paid, it made him act really quickly versus necessarily kind of waiting and seeing or trying to contact him to work something out. It's much easier in that situation to just foreclose because you don't want it to get worse and you can't rely on them to do that. How do you find out that the first is not getting paid in the first place?
Well, there's a few different ways, but typically we can pull a credit report.
Okay.
Or sometimes we have the borrower's information, we have the social security number and the lender's phone number, so we can call in and use the automated system and type it in and find out. But probably the safest way is we're signed up with what's called a no-hit credit reporting service. It doesn't ding the borrower as an inquiry. It's just like an informational credit report. So we can pull credit reports once in a while and see what's going on with the first mortgage. But let me just add one thing, is that this lady had quit paying the first mortgage. So she was like a year delinquent. And normally I would reinstate the loan. I would not let it get that delinquent, but it was over $10,000 a month. And the amount to bring the loan current was $170,000.
It's a big chunk.
So I didn't want to write a check for $170,000. And so the first mortgage started foreclosure in the middle of January this year. And I knew that we were already selling the house, we were getting ready to open escrow, so I didn't worry too much about it. If this deal would have fallen through, I would have had to scramble and come up with $170,000 and bring the first current to buying us some more time. But luckily the guy closed escrow this week.
Okay.
On Monday.
They got it all paid off.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let me interject here. He did worry about it.
I did worry about it.
He did worry about it. I want to add something. I did a deal not too long ago. It was a note. It was a problem note that they weren't getting payments on, and there were some other things about it. And I bought it. I bought the note, not all cash, but I bought it with another note. It was called a performance note. The performance note said, if and when I get paid, I'll pay you. So I only had to come out of a little bit of money just for transferring the ownership of the note into my.
So you were able to structure the deal where basically you bought paper with someone else's money and created, hypothecated that note and said, I'm going to give you a new note secured against your note? Is it how that worked? Or?
Well, hypothecations where you collateralize one note by another. Instead of a house, by another one.
Thanks for the clarification.
And I really didn't even do that.
Okay.
My note just said, I owe you money. I'll pay you if and when I get paid.
Okay.
Huh? If and when I get paid. As I get paid, I will pay you.
And so that borrower is looking at it, or that the person he's borrowing the money from is looking at it saying, okay, because I understand the situation and understand, his risk level and his experience actually, and what he would do to protect that borrower in the first place, they were comfortable lending him that money in the first place to be able to go do that and perform on that. Well,
Slightly different.
okay.
Okay, it was an instance where the borrower wasn't making payments to the person who owned the note.
Okay.
I purchased the note from the note holder, and instead of giving them cash, the reason I use this, instead of giving them cash, I gave them an IOU,
Okay, so
which
it's
just
that-
said, because you're not getting paid and there's some other things that need to be taken care of, which makes this more difficult, I'll pay you if and when I get paid. And that's called a performance note.
So they're just relying on you to go perform and do what you do to protect and your money and you know, make money for it yourself,
Right.
to then go and deal with it. Okay, interesting.
And Mike, just a second. And this is very common, and this was in this case, of between family members. See how he's going like this? Yeah,
So you're saying you bought the note as an IOU?
with an
With
IOU.
an IOU.
Yeah. And actually, the balance on the note is about $186,000, and my IOU to them is for $45,000, and I will pay them as I get money from.
So once
On the other-
once your note sells, if and when it does, then
I get the difference.
So everybody keep that in mind. If you loan money to family members, make sure it's secured by a house and then sell it to Bill and he'll go and take care of it for you so you don't have to foreclose on your own family members. Say, I sold that note off, it's not mine anymore.
I can't tell you how many times I've done real estate and notes. Well, actually, I probably could count them up. But where in the contract, the agreement to acquire the house, the property, or the note, it said you must evict the owner of the house, or you must foreclose on the owner of the house.
Interesting.
It's usually a parent and a child.
Okay, cool.
So the problem you're solving there was you were taking that headache off of the original note owner, and you're putting that headache on your shoulders, is that correct?
No headache on me,
So what is the, okay, fine.
because I wasn't making any payments. I'm not making any payments.
So there's no risk to him, but he's handling the workload involved.
Yeah,
Right.
well, so the incentive for the note holder is what now?
yeah.
As the owner of the note said to me, is kick his ass out of that house.
He didn't want to deal with it.
I
You didn't wanna do
didn't,
it.
I didn't add the descriptives in there.
There was extra language?
Yes.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I mean, if you've ever, see, whenever I deal with family, I'm just telling you, I never lend money to family. I will give them money. I will never lend them money. Because whenever you deal with family and money, it can really blow up. Just as bad, or actually it's worse than borrowing money from somebody else. Because that can ruin
You got to live
family
with it for the rest of your
relationships.
life, right? Huge, absolutely. Gerald, can you talk a little bit about when you are starting to analyze non-performing paper, not on the property due diligence side, but on the actual note paperwork side? What are some of the, can you kind of give a general run through of some of the due diligence steps that you do when you're starting to look at a non-performing asset, a non-performing paper, to make sure that you're not going to lose money, you know, and you might have to relate it to some of the property, of course, but from the paperwork side on the loan in itself?
Sure. When we start talking to private note holders, one of the first things we ask them is, do you have the original note? You know, I was talking to a guy, and you wouldn't believe this. I was trying to buy a note on a property in Palos Verde. I mean, it was $1 million home with a $400,000 first mortgage, and it was a $300,000 second. And the note seller couldn't find the original note, and he didn't even have a Xerox copy of the note. And I was willing to pay this guy, you know, at least $100,000 for that note, but he never could come up with any paperwork. And so I said, you know, I'm sorry, I can't buy it. You know, so this guy basically threw away, you know, a couple $100,000
By not having it
by
original.
not keeping up with his filing, with his, you know, document retention. But you know, that's the primary thing, and Bill talks about this all the time. That's the primary thing, making sure they have the authority to transfer the note. You know, I was dealing with a trust a while back, and one of the it was a husband and wife on the trust, and the wife had passed away, and I had to work with a title company and make sure that the husband, as a sole signer, had the authority to sign that transfer, that assignment of deed of trust. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Is, you know, making sure that you have clear title, that the person that's selling you the note has the authority to sell that, to sign all the documents required to transfer that note over to us. And the pay history is real important. You know, I bought a note from a guy down in National City, and this guy's 94 years old. And his pay history was a book You know how you, like what you wrote the receipt when you checked into the meeting for $20 or whatever? Every time he got a check, he would write out a receipt in that little book of his. And that works. I mean, that's fine, you know, because it goes back 10 years of 10 years of every month writing out that receipt. And then he quit paying 7 years ago. And so we had a good paper trail of what the balance, from all those receipts, I can figure out what the balance on the loan is, what the arrears are, the back interest, things like that. But the pay history, good chain of title, the original note, that's the primary things that I'm looking for.
What about inside the note? Well, go ahead.
Something really important that he knows that he neglected to bring up, and that is that Palos Verdes note that he was talking about, that the owner couldn't find the note. If the person who owes money, the IOU, the person who owes the money, if they find out that they lost that note, they don't have to ever make another payment again.
It was a non-performing note.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if they know that,
Right.
if they know that they lost the original, then they can just stop making payments, and there's nothing the note holder can do.
And this is the same problem that occurred when the crash happened, right? Where they scanned in
Absolutely.
everything and they didn't have their original notes. All the big mortgage companies started scanning everything. What was the system called again?
Robo-signing?
MERS.
MERS, yeah. So they
MERS.
started
Oh,
going
yeah,
through and
MERS.
scanning everything in, and they didn't have the originals, and so you had all these lawsuits happening saying, you know, you don't have the original note, I don't have to pay you, and attorneys jumped on board like crazy for that. You know, of course, because you can get somebody a free and clear house from because they messed up their paperwork. They're going to do that, so it's interesting. And on the actual note in itself, like some of the clauses and things to be aware of within the note, as well as you know, some of the things to watch out with for the actual borrower. You know, like bankruptcy or issues that could come up with them or getting wiped out in certain states. What are some of the other things that can pop out to be aware of when you're looking at the paperwork involved and trying to analyze the due diligence piece of buying a piece of paper or buying notes?
Within the note, I'm not sure.
There's not a whole lot. Okay.
You know, you just have to
So,
due on sale. Due on sale clause, that hardly ever comes into play with me.
right, with default.
With defaulted notes. You know, I'm dealing with a lady right now that's questioning the note that the payment plan that we structured for her. She's the house down in Solano Beach, and she's saying that I calculated the interest wrong. It's really hard. Like, this is a HELOC, and it's got a really complicated structure where it's a certain interest rate, like a margin over an index. You know, Wall Street Journal prime money rate plus an index or a
So
margin.
that's going to change constantly, right?
Well, it could change constantly, and it's just the way the whole note is written. We came up with 8%, and she's saying, no, it's not 8%, it's 6.5%. You know, and it's really hard to interpret that language within the note. Something I was looking at yesterday. You know, I'm actually having to hire an attorney right now.
Just to prove.
Well, she's an attorney. The lady that owns the house down in Solano Beach is a bankruptcy attorney. So
Okay.
she's sending me all these threatening letters, you know. And it's just you know, I'm being cautionary, and I'm getting counsel to represent me to interact with this lady.
Okay.
She's not filed a lawsuit or anything, but she sends all these threatening letters. You know, you're causing me harm and suffering, and you know, I can't sleep at night because you're threatening to foreclose on me, and you know, so it's just, I mean, she's reaching,
Right.
you know, but she's trying to build a case against me.
Say, by documenting this stuff, saying these things, which
Yeah.
there's no proof behind. It's just a matter of, interesting.
It's bogus, but you know, I had a guy file a civil lawsuit against me. I foreclosed on him, a house down in San Clemente, and he filed $1.5 million civil lawsuit against me, and it was all frivolous and bogus. But I still had to get an attorney to go represent me and get it thrown out.
Right.
It cost me $5,000.
Right.
You know, to
Interesting.
get the case dismissed.
And if someone does declare bankruptcy on you when you just buy a note, what do you do?
You get a bankruptcy attorney. I mean, you can file, the first document you file is called a proof of claim.
Okay.
It's a POC. You just want to make sure that you get your name and information into the bankruptcy records.
Okay.
So that I'm a lender on this property and I'm entitled to this, and you have to notice me when the notices are sent out, be sure to include me on the mailing list. And then you may have to, one of the common things that people try to do nowadays, if there's not much equity in the property, is lien strip. They try to do what's called a cram down or lien strip. If there's no equity over the first mortgage, then the homeowner can get an attorney, and your lien becomes unsecured debt. It drops down to the level of like credit card debt.
Okay.
So instead of getting 90 cents on the dollar, I might get 10 or 15 cents on the dollar when the bankruptcy trustees pay out the money.
Maybe.
Yeah, if you're
It
lucky,
just,
right?
it just makes
depends
it
on
just,
the bankruptcy in
it
itself,
just
right?
significantly lowers the value of the note.
Okay. If they do, and then how often does that happen, and how do you mitigate your risk of that occurring so that you don't get such a small amount of?
It happens a lot, and one of the things that I've done is I just don't start aggressive collection. If I see a property with that's negative equity, I'm not going to throw it into foreclosure. I'll just, I buy these loans cheap. I mean, I pay sometimes 8, 10, 12 cents on the dollar for these negative equity loans, and I stick them in the file cabinet, and I pull them out once every 6 months and look at them, any equity yet. And if there's no equity, I just put it back in the file cabinet.
Even if they're not paying and it's in arrears.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're waiting for that equity to occur, so then that way you can get paid off, so you're not, basically credit card debt.
Exactly.
You're not unsecured debt anymore.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've had a few of these. Like I got one in Stockton right now. It's $1 million house, and I'm getting $950 a month from the trustee, even though the lien was stripped.
Okay.
We had paid a good bit of money for that loan, $35,000-$40,000. But one of the problems is when the bank that sold it to us, the paperwork didn't come through very quickly. It took us like 3 months to transfer the loan.
Okay.
And in that three-month interim, they filed Chapter 13 bankruptcy and stripped the lien
Interesting.
before the lien ever completely transferred over to us.
Okay. Interesting.
So it was something to watch out for. Nowadays, when we buy a loan, we immediately start checking Pacer, the bankruptcy website, and make sure that nothing's happening on that loan.
Okay. What about yourself, Bill? How do you protect yourself on the paperwork side when you're doing these types of non-conforming paper strategies?
Well, wow.
Generally, I know it's there's a lot, but
Yeah.
and I guess you could talk about the property as well, because that's a
Well,
huge piece
I
of it.
wanted to go back to that.
Okay.
Because you must understand when you're buying a note that the ultimate payer on the note is not the borrower, but it's the property, the collateral. And you have to then figure out if the property will eventually pay you back. Now, he's putting the notes in the file cabinet because he believes that the property will eventually pay him back, not the borrower. So when he's buying these notes, he's not looking for the borrower to pay him back, he's looking for eventually the property to pay him. Does that make sense? So that's number one on the list. Is the property of value? More importantly to me, would I ever want to own this property for the amount of money I'm putting out there? A lot of times, people nowadays are buying notes on properties sight unseen, and they really would not want that property if ever they went and looked at it. Okay. They're thinking more in terms of return on their investment than return of their investment. Look at the borrower. Look at the property, look at the borrower, look at the quality of the note. How well was it written? Payment history. Is there a payment history? If there's not a payment history, could we create one? One way to develop history is to get the bank records of the payer to prove that they have made all the payments. That's really, really hard to do. Mm-hmm. And the only way you can ever do that is to give them an incentive to do so. And I have been very successful because I give them an incentive. If I'm going to buy a note at 10 cents on the dollar, I am willing to discount what they owe if they show me that they've made the payments to a certain point. Does that make sense? So then I can develop a pay history of how long they paid till, what reasons they stop making payments, because that all goes into the history of the note, making it either more valuable or less valuable. Let's see, what else?
And with the property itself, how are you determining to make sure that that property will pay you back in the future? What are the things you look at, and what are the risks associated with the property to determine that?
Okay, first off, I rarely go out of state anymore. Okay, because there are different laws, there are different rules, there are different. Here we use a deed of trust. Other states use other liens, security devices. One's a contract for deed, and one is a mortgage. A contract for deed is also known as a land contract. Where was I going?
So with the property,
With the
due
property.
diligence.
Due diligence. I have been in this business a long time. I can get on the phone and call somebody. For instance, a while back now, but I was looking at a note on a property near Sacramento. And I had a friend, his name was Reggie. And I was able to call Reggie up and say, hey Reggie, will you please give me a call? Would you please go check this property out for me? I'm thinking about buying the note on it. And he came back and he told me the pluses and minuses. I passed on that note because I didn't like the high tension wires right behind the property. Another friend of ours named Clyde, I had him go look at the property for me, and he'll never let me forget it because he felt he couldn't get out of the car. So, and these are people I know and trust. I know they know their real estate. I know they know value, so I can trust them. And so, other than that, I go look at the property. If it's not somebody, I make sure I look at the property.
Okay.
Nowadays, if I buy a note, it's on a property that if everything absolutely went wrong, I'd want to own that property. Unless they found toxic waste on it.
Then you got a problem. So when you're buying these notes, I mean, from my perspective, being a flipper and and buying and holding properties and things like that, especially in multifamily, you look at environmental issues. You look at what is the rehab cost going to be on this thing? If I had to take it back, and am I still going to actually go and be able to sell it for market value? What are some of the different things that you do on that property to look at to say, what could my total all-in cost be at the maximum, and what could I sell that for on the back end to see if that pays you back, right? I mean,
and I also check who the ownership is,
okay,
the ownership of the property. You have to, because they may be in trouble.
you could have a note that's in someone's name and the owner is in someone else's name in that case.
Or in one instance, they were trying to sell the property. One of the owners had passed away, and the mechanism for transferring their interest to another member of their family wasn't even in the works.
Okay.
So they couldn't transfer clear title to the property.
Okay.
However, I was able to solve it.
Nice. So, what are some of the differences between buying performing paper versus non-performing paper, and what are some of the, I guess, risk differences between the two in the profiles? That's a hard
Night and
question
day,
to answer. Yeah, I know. I'm just looking at like the
performing
different types.
paper. Okay, performing paper. That means that they're making payments. There's a history they're making payments. They agree on how much they owe, and the loan's still on the property versus the value. The loan to value is still very good, so that if you invest your money, you have a safe investment, and you have what's called protective equity above what they owe on the property and the value of the property. You want to know if it's a declining market area, a declining
To see if
area.
see if your equity is decreasing, right, over what your
Well,
note value is.
you might when the property was built, it was very nice, and in 20 years, the area has declined.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that happen before?
And what when you're actually going through and trying to buy this different paper, I mean, you get a lot of your non-performing paper from institutions that are buying larger bulks and then trickling some to you as well, right? But then on the performing paper side, it's a totally different incentive to get them to actually sell you the property, I would assume. I mean, there's probably distress in both situations, but in your situation, when you're actually buying this non-performing paper, you're dealing with banks that are already saying, hey, this is non-performing, do you want to buy this from us? In that kind of a situation. When you're actually buying performing paper, it's probably, you're not from banks and institutions like that, it's probably from more private investors, I would assume. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But what are the incentives for someone that owns performing paper to sell you that note? What are the differences in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so most of the time they want their capital back.
Okay.
You know, they can sit there and clip a coupon, you know, get $200 a month in on that note, but if they sold it, maybe they're going to get $30,000 for the note.
Okay.
Typically the reason I don't buy that much performing paper is because most people want to sell performing paper at like a low yield, like 8% or
Okay.
something, 6.5%.
Okay.
And
Some people think that's a good yield.
Well, coupon, yeah.
And I'm looking for 15 or 18%.
Well, you're also working at it too. There's definitely a big difference between working at it and being completely passive.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I bought a note. I mean, yeah. So that's the biggest difference for me. And you know, when you're pricing a note, I always look at the lower of. You know, I base it on either the yield of the note or the loan to value. So if I've got, like, I bought a note a while back. It was a $65,000 first mortgage on a $500,000 house.
Wow.
And the
Was
payment
it
first?
It was the first, yeah. But it was non-performing.
Okay.
But, you know, hypothetically, if she was paying, you know, if I could buy that note at an 8% yield, that's what they would sell it at because there's a ton of protective equity over it. But if the property was only worth, say, $50,000 and I got a $65,000 note, on that case, I'm going to end up buying that at a higher yield because of the lack of equity.
Okay.
You know, maybe we could justify a 14% yield on that note because I'm only going to buy it at, say, a 65% loan to value.
Okay, you're looking at the risk difference basically of the, you know, what something with high equity versus low equity.
Well, and it's the way you calculate. I'm gonna buy the note at the lower of the price based on yield or loan to value.
Okay.
So if even though the yield might be 12% on that note where the property's worth 60, and I'm buying the note for say $30,000, I might even get a 12% yield on that deal. Whereas opposed to if the house is worth $100,000 and I'm buying it for $30,000, that's going to be based on yield. The seller of that note is going to say, hey, there's a ton of equity. You know, I want a certain price, which will give you an 8% yield.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes sense, if I'm explaining that very well. I do better with a whiteboard than a slide presentation, but
Easier to
if
see,
you can picture that.
Does anybody here do not understand the term yield? Okay, thank you, because that's common. You've heard of return on investment. Okay. Well, that's really what yield is. Yield is what you expect to return divided by what you paid. For example, let's say that there's a $100,000 loan, 12% interest only, which means you're only paying the rent on the loan every month of $1,000 a month. So that would be 12% interest because you're going to get $12,000 in 1 year. Divide that by a $100,000 investment. That's 12%. But if you were to buy this note for less than $100,000, let's say you only buy it for $80,000, you only pay $80,000, and you're still getting 12% interest, $12,000 over the year, but the investment's only $80,000. That means your yield would be 15%. So when your professionals buying notes, almost always they're professionals when they're talking about yield, the return on their investment.
And I think it's important to understand the difference between yield and the coupon rate on the note. The coupon rate on the note is actually the interest rate that is written into the actual loan document. That's the interest rate that borrower is paying on what they borrowed. But, you know, if you, same situation, if you buy a $100,000 note, that has a 6.5% interest rate on the note in itself, but you bought it for much less, then your yield is much higher because it's not based on it's based on what you bought it for versus what the note value is. So when you're looking at, when people say I'm buying a note at a discount, and my yield is higher, it's because the actual interest rate on the coupon rate inside the note, which the coupon rate is what's in the note, is totally different than what your rate is because you're buying it at a lower value. Does that make sense? So
And also understand, you can't make the payer pay any more than they're in contract to do. It's on the note.
if they're paying that in the first
If
place.
they're paying it. And by the way, going back to what we're talking for, performing notes, if you're buying if somebody buys a performing note, they're looking to get a monthly income from it. Okay. And then you might also buy a note, non-performing note, to get the property, as opposed to you might buy it, so in the future you might get a lump sum cash, or you might buy it to get another way to get to the real estate.
Yeah, I think that's a huge play right there. A lot of people don't realize that. You're trying to go and fight on the MLS or fight on, getting pocket listings and things like that here in California. If you're able to go the opposite way from a defaulted paper and try to buy the paper instead of trying to buy the property like everybody else is, you can have a big advantage if you know how to do that and know how to work those channels versus trying to buy the property that might be on the MLS or something like that. So
Another good way to explain yield is, if you're going to go put $10,000 in the bank and they're going to pay you 1.5% interest rate, that's the same thing as your yield. It's the same as the interest rate you're making on the money that you have in your savings account. It's just that we're shooting for 8% or 12% compared to the banks are paying, 1% or something
Or
like
less.
that. Or less. Yeah.
what do you got? Go ahead.
So as a performing note, is that it's not collateralized against the property?
Well, a performing note is they're making the payments. Okay. Now, if we're talking about a real estate note, okay, it's an IOU, and let me get to the basics. Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay. Basics. Notes are simply a promise to pay, an IOU. Now, if I give you $100,000, I really don't know you, right? So I'm not going to give you the money unless I believe I can twist your arm to make me pay. And one way for me to do that would be to say, okay, you don't pay me, then I want to take your house. So I could secure your IOU against your house with your agreement. A real good example, everybody buy cars? Did you pay all cash or did you borrow money to do so? If you borrow money, did you own the car? No. You don't own the car till you get what?
Pay it off.
Pink slip.
Right.
So whoever holds the pink slip owns the car. Well, whoever lent you the money holds the pink slip until you pay it off. Well, in real estate, it's opposite. We'll let you own the house first. We'll make sure that you pay us by saying, if you don't pay us, then we want a mechanism, state of California, deed of trust. Okay, you don't pay me, okay, I was the lender, you were the borrower, then I'm going to go to a third party and say, hey, he's not paying me. So he's going to go talk to you and say, hey, he says you're not paying me. Is that true? Well, you may say yes, but you prove it. If you're not paying him, then he says, well, okay, now the disinterested third party is going to go, look, if you're not going to pay him, then we're going to foreclose on you, sell the house. If there's any money left over, you get it. But we'll use the money to pay off your loan.
So you have the promissory note, which is the contract. This is how much you owe. This is the interest. This is the late penalties. This is the collateral involved. That's like the contract. And then you have the deed of trust. That's what gets secured at the recorder's office. Secures your money against the property, so that way you have your collateral piece. It's like the pink slip for the car, example, but this one is secured at the recorder's office. So that way, those two documents I think are extremely important to understand. And there's differences in each state. When we're talking about out-of-state investments, you have judicial foreclosure states and traditional foreclosure states or non-judicial foreclosure states. The non-judicial foreclosure states, you typically file and foreclose, just like California, and And once you start the foreclosure paperwork, then you typically can foreclose relatively quickly. When you're in a judicial foreclosure state, a lot of times you have to sue them to foreclose. It could take a year or two or longer sometimes to actually be able to finish that lawsuit to then take that property back.
I don't buy notes in New Jersey or New York anymore because it takes 4 or 5 years to go through the process.
And if you think about it, that kills you. So,
It's a pain in the butt.
A mortgage and a note. Is there a difference between the two? I've heard that
Okay.
they're kind of minor differences.
Now,
Just wanna clarify.
the terminology is sloppy. Okay, we all refer to everything as a mortgage. Okay? However, we are a deed of trust state. Okay, the security for loans against real estate in the state of California, and usually on the west part of the country, are deeds of trust. Okay? In other parts of the country, they use a mortgage. There's an IOU and a deed of trust here in California. In other places, there's an IOU note and a mortgage. Instead of a deed of trust, they use a mortgage. In other states, remember the pink slip in car? A contract for deed is whoever sold you the house, they hold the pink slip till you pay them off. That's also known as a land contract. So we get real sloppy and we say everybody has a mortgage, even in deed of trust states. Okay? Just like Kleenex is the generic name, mortgage is the generic term for owing money, when in actuality a mortgage is the security instrument to make sure that you pay me or we'll take your house.
so mortgage and deed of trust are virtually the same things. There's some differences, I would assume.
Mortgages, you have to use a judicial foreclosure. You have to go through a court. Contract for deed, got to go through court.
So in a
I am allergic to courts.
Speaking about the contract for deed, it's a great strategy, I think, to utilize to be able to sell a property to a homeowner and be able to have a contract which basically says, once you pay off the loan, I'm going to loan you this money, and once you pay off this loan, then you will get title afterwards, very similar to a car. In that situation, my biggest issue with them has always been that I feel like I'm technically still the homeowner, so I still have the liability and the risks and all that stuff as a homeowner. It's almost like a lease option type of thing, but you're putting a mortgage in place, right? Have you guys had the same experiences or any negative effects associated with land contracts?
I do land contracts a lot, but usually it's low value property. I've got a condo in Memphis that I sold for $35,000
Okay.
on a land contract because not many banks are going to go out and loan $35,000 to someone to buy a house.
They don't do it, right? Under
It's
50,
just too
they
small
don't
of
do
an
it.
amount,
Right.
So we sold it. We're getting $500 a month. He gave us a $1,000 down payment,
Okay.
$500 a month for 78 months,
Okay.
and it worked out to be about a 18 or 19% ROI or return or yield on it.
And if they don't pay you, then you evict like a tenant? How does
Yes.
that work? Okay.
Yes.
But then if they mess up the property, then it's basically on you as well, right?
Right.
At the same time, they've hopefully paid down that loan. You've been making 18% the entire time. So there is some risk associated with it, but it seems like a lot easier situation. Can you freely sell those land contracts like you can notes, or is there different problems
You
with
can,
it?
but I've never tried to. I
Okay.
like having the cash flow.
Okay.
I got a house in Lakeland, Florida, that I bought the note for like $13,000. I've sold that house 3 times on land contract. One guy died,
Okay.
and luckily I had recorded a deed. On that particular one, I had actually deeded the property to him. It was kind of before I knew any better, but I was smart enough to get a quitclaim deed back to me that I just held in the file.
Okay.
So once he died, I just recorded that quitclaim deed, and I got title back into my name.
Okay, and then when you're dealing with situations like that, when you say I didn't know any better, you're saying that previously you went and sold it to him fully and had a deed of trust or mortgage in place, and then had to foreclose on them to take the property back, which costs you some legal costs and some extra
And
time.
time, yeah.
Versus a land contract, wouldn't it still cost you some legal costs and things like that to take that back?
Minimum.
In that situation? Okay.
It's like you say, it's like evicting a tenant.
Okay, and how is that owner secured in a situation like that? or are they not?
They're not, but I give them a notarized sale agreement.
Okay.
So just to make them happy.
So it's
you
a
know.
purchase contract that says that once it's done, once they paid it off, then you will deed it over to them.
Yes.
In that case.
That's what a land contract or contract
Right.
for deed is a contract. And by the way, in the Midwest, contract for deeds are used primarily, and there's no problem with that. There's an equitable interest and a legal interest, and the people who have equitable interest, they own the house.
Okay.
For all legal purposes.
You said that the land contract, in order to take back the property, you don't have to go through the foreclosure process?
He said it, not me.
That's my experience.
In the Midwest, when I did it, I had to go through the legal process.
Really?
Was it a judicial foreclosure state? Is that why? In
Well,
that case?
yes,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Question?
because they had equitable interest.
Bill, earlier you said that the quality of the preparation of the note is a critical concept.
Absolutely.
Now, are there templates or guidelines to point out specific things that should be included in the wording and stuff that may be fluff? Or are there templates or guidelines for all of this? Like model
Sure.
note wordings?
Absolutely.
Where do you find that?
You go to the county recorder's office, you look at everybody's mortgage, a lot of them have their notes in there.
So
Now-
yeah.
I don't like them, but they have all the things that you really need to have in there.
What are some of the things you change versus, or that you like to see in those notes that sometimes are not in there?
Yeah, good question.
Well, if it is, if you use a note based upon what banks and everything use, they have all the wording in there.
Okay.
Because they have tens of years, I mean hundreds of years to work that out. It's when you get with the private people that they forget to put things in.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Like a late fee. I once was brought a note and there were no late fees, so there was no incentive for them to pay. There were no late fees. Only thing you could do was foreclose on the property. There wasn't a date that it was created. I want to share this story going back a long time. He said it much earlier. When the owner couldn't find the note, well, I had an owner of the note who said, I can't find my note, but I have this Xerox copy of the note. He says, how much will you pay for it? And it was $100,000. Let's say it was a $100,000 note. I said, I'll pay you $80,000. He says, you will? I said, yeah. I said, I'll write an $80,000 check. I'll make a Xerox copy of it, and I'll pay you that Xerox copy of my note, of my check for your Xerox copy of your note. Both of them are worthless. So I just wanted to, that was my story to get you to remember that. You gotta have fun in this business sometimes.
I've got a deal I can tell you about if you have time for it. It might be a little bit advanced for this group, but I bought a note recently in Del Mar, near
He's
Carlsbad.
buying a lot of things out of my area.
neighborhood.
I'm from San Diego, if you don't know that.
This was a performing note. It was a nice house, $2 million house. The first mortgage was like $600,000. This was a $313,000 second mortgage. Performing, never missed a payment. And it was interest only with a 5-year balloon.
Okay.
So 5 years of payments, the full amount, the $313,000 is due at the end of 5 years. It was a lady's going through a divorce. She said, my husband and I have this note and we want to split things up and I just want to sell it. So we haggled back and forth on the price. I ended up buying it for $240,000. And this, I had to write it down because I had to get the numbers right. But the note was a 12% face interest rate.
Wow.
And I bought it, $313,000. I got it for $240,000. So the discount, I think my yield is like 15.7% because I bought it at a lower price than the $313,000 owed on it. And again, I'm not normally happy with 12 or 13% myself. So I went and found a partner, and I sold half of this note to somebody into their IRA account, and I'm paying them 10% interest on that. So they spend $160,000, and they get $1,325 a month. So the payment on the note that I bought is $3,130 a month, $3,130. 12% works out to be 1% a month on $313,000. So that's $3,130 a month. So I pay the lady. I sold the half of that note for 160. I bought the note for 240. So my half of the note cost me $80,000. And so the person I sold half of the note to is getting $13.25 a month. 1% a month, or actually 10% a year on their investment works out to be $13.25 a month. So $31.30 minus $13.25 is $1,805 a month. So my note that I paid $80,000 for, I'm getting $1,800 a month on, $1,805.
Huge. Yeah.
So that works out to be a 27% yield. So that's what I did is I sold a partial on it. You can sell a part of a note. You can sell the front end of a note. Like if you have 180 payments, you can take 60 payments, sell it to somebody else, get a big chunk of your capital back, and then once those 60 payments are made, then you get the full payment for the remaining 180 months. That's how partials work. Or you can slice the payment vertically, horizontally, where if I'm getting in $600 a month, I'm keeping 200, giving them 400. So you can divide the note up, and that's how. Instead of selling the whole note, this is something Mick Blackwell talked to me about. He said, Gerald, don't sell your note. Just sell part of it. Just sell a partial or something like that. And it's worked out really well over time. So, I invested $80,000, and I'm getting $21,660 a year in on that note, which works out to be about a 27% return. And then at the end of this deal, in 5 years, when they have to pay this off in full, the person I sold the half of the note to, gets their share of the $313,000, which is like $160,000 back, and I get $153,000 back at the end of that 5 years. So in addition to that actually increases my yield somewhat. I think it bumps it up to about 31%. So I get an extra 4% when that money comes back to me at the end of the deal. Does everyone follow that? Is it complicated?
Let me say something. Just understand this. He got a great yield, and he engineered it, right? A great yield is only great if you get paid. So many people get the stars in their eyes that I'm getting such a large return on my investment. Only is a great investment if you get paid.
That's absolutely true.
I have this thing right in front of my face every day, and that's exactly what it says. A good return is only good if you get paid. So it's just there to remind me, how am I going to make sure that I get paid? You have a question.
So when you say you split the note and you sold part of it, is that creating two separate notes or is two owners for the same note?
Well, I put this note into a trust, a personal property trust, and both partners, me and the other guy, are beneficiaries of that trust. But I've got a contract with him that spells out the terms of our agreement, and I even have a payment schedule attached to it. So his 60 months of payments are shown there, and so you just document it properly, and then we're both beneficiaries of the trust. So it's like putting a note into an LLC, basically, and you have two members.
And I would do it differently. I would do what you were talking about. I would give them a note secured by the note I bought, so that I owned the main note. It's safer.
Yeah.
My question is, when you're buying a house to rent out, you set aside a certain percentage for maintenance and for loss reserve. What do you guys do when you're setting up your notes? Do you have a certain percentage that you just factor in that you're going to lose?
Oh,
As far as a risk buffer or something like that, a reserve.
Okay. I was going to say, well, you run in real estate there pretty well. By the way, I set aside 40 to 50% for rentals, by the way. I only do a small reserve. I tend to like to work with people.
I don't do any. It's just the cost of doing business. It's not significant enough. when you have a rental property, that can be very significant, vacancies and rehabs and, you know, a new roof or a new air conditioning system. But with a note business, it's very different. You know, you have servicing costs, you know, maybe you have to go into foreclosure later on to collect your money, but I don't make any kind of allocation for that.
Is that because you cherry pick your notes that you buy?
I'm more conservative, and he buys more notes.
The more you buy, the less reserve you really
And
need.
also
It's just a
understand,
percentage.
most of the notes that I buy, I had a hand in their creation. It makes a really big difference.
Because you can structure it the exact way you want it structured to protect yourself.
Not only can I structure it the way I want to, I see the whole picture right up front. I like that. I happen to be a founding member of Controlaholics Anonymous.
Yeah, I have a business. I mean, I have 4 employees plus a bookkeeper that comes in a couple days a week. I have an office staff, and we have about 300 notes right now that we manage, about $25 million principal balance on those notes. So it's just kind of like the overhead. I mean, if there's some maintenance that has to be done on a note, it's just part of my overhead.
That's
He's
pretty-
willing to work harder than I am.
It's pretty amazing though if you think
For a
about it.
while,
If he
worked hard
talks
for a
about
while.
25 million of balances, you know, if he's buying these things and in the heyday you're buying them for really cheap, but I mean you're looking at like 10% or something like that on the balance. You know, could you imagine controlling $25 million worth of notes with, you know, call it 2.5 million or so of actual investable dollars that you can then go hypothecate or utilize other investors involved in to be able to not have to be in it for so much of your own capital? One of the strategies I use is that same type of method, but I like the collateralization approach as well, just because I want to have that control involved. And most of my investors are not as sophisticated as I am with regard to it, so I want to be able to go through and control it if something goes wrong and still make the payment to my investor if I need to in the meantime, so that they're happy and then take control and do what I need to do. But for example, you know, there's some awesome strategies doing that. If you go buy a note and you're making, you know, 14, 15% on your money, or even 10% on your money, and you have another investor come in with 6 or 8 or something along those lines that, you know, doesn't want to keep their money in CDs, for example, but isn't sophisticated, you want to control that piece because of the fact that they're not sophisticated. You don't want them telling you how to control your paper in that case. But what's crazy is if you were able to go raise it at 8, for example, and you're making 15, and you could raise all the money or a big chunk of that money or 75% of the money, your yield goes through the roof on the remaining capital you have left in that deal, if you have anything left in the deal in the first place. We just did a deal in Tennessee, which I talked about a few times, but where I bought a property back from an investor that bought a house from me in 2008, they bought it in 2012, and I bought it back for them for the same price, for $68,000. Not a big deal, you know, but I bought it back from them with 100% seller financing except for $2,000 down. So I put $2,000 down. They loaned me $66,000 at 5% interest for 10 years. Amortized over 30 years. So I have a balloon at the end of 10. We don't want to go longer than 10 years. And so then I went and resold the property. I put about $5,000 into it. So with closing costs, I'm into it for about 10 and everything. With closing costs on my purchase and closing costs on my sale, plus my 5 into it, I'm into it for about 10. I went and sold the property for $90,000 because that's how much it was worth, because they originally bought it for me in 2012, right? So now it's 2016 when I closed on this thing, and it was worth much more money at that point. And so I was able to go through, have that new buyer put $10,000 down. I carried an $80,000 loan, and I wrapped my current loan into that loan. So then now what's happening is I still might owe my payment, but then I get a payment also from my investor that put $10,000 down. I'm literally in it for nothing, and I'm making a spread on that note. And I gave him a 5% interest rate too. I could have given him, you know, 7 or something like that, and maybe even more of a spread where I'm making 7 on the entire 80 when I'm only paying 5 on the 66,000. So by doing those types of strategies and learning those strategies, you can bump your returns substantially and still really not have a whole lot of risk involved. In Tennessee, I know it cost me $2,000 in a couple months to actually foreclose on a property if I had to, which really is not that much of a risk in my eyes, but I'm also loaning to an investor. When you're dealing with homeowners, it's a whole different ball game. When you're buying non-performing paper from homeowners, you have your certain levels of risk, but you're not creating the paper in itself. When you're creating paper to a homeowner, you have to abide by some new rules. Can you talk about a couple of those rules as far as Dodd-Frank and the SAFE Act?
I was going to say just 2 words, Dodd-Frank.
Yeah, so,
And so you pay somebody to do the underwriting.
right, so you
make sure
you
it's
have
good.
to have a national mortgage license originator that's going to go through and originate the loan for you and do all the paperwork involved for you. And there's some requirements like making sure that they can go and make those payments. Like when I'm seller financing a tenant in my property, the proof that they've made those payments for 6 to 12 months at the rent amount is key. Because that backs me up for the Dodd-Frank requirements, for example. So those types of things can be really, really important. Is there any other issues that you can think of that come up from the Dodd-Frank issues and the SAFE Act issues when you're dealing with homeowners?
I don't deal with Dodd-Frank at all. I mean, I buy notes that are originated by somebody else.
Okay.
I don't create any new notes at all.
Okay. So Dodd-Frank doesn't apply when you're actually buying a note that's already originated. It's for people that are originating the notes in themselves, right?
You still need to know and understand Dodd-Frank because the institutions have been known to make mistakes.
Okay. Interesting.
Sure.
So does anybody understand the issues with that, with homeowners? Because of what happened in the past, they put Dodd-Frank in place, which basically gave a monopoly to the big banks instead of having the private investors lend money. They tried to say that it was to protect homeowners from unscrupulous lenders. But then they make you be a national mortgage license originator and jump through a bunch of hoops to write these loans. But the people that were the biggest problems in attacking homeowners that or giving bad loans to homeowners that were not in their best interest were the big banks in themselves, like Wells Fargo and some of these other big ones had major problems with that in the past and had major lawsuits against them for doing these option arm loans that the monthly payment triples in 5 years or something like that, which causes a big problem. So
Do you guys understand that if you make a loan, that creates a note? Does everybody understand? Is anybody even considering making loans? My suggestion, and I'll say it really slowly, do not lend to homeowners, especially in California.
Oh, yeah. You got to be really, really careful what states you're doing business in when you're doing that. And if you're not seasoned, then he's absolutely right. Make sure you're seasoned before you start doing loans to homeowners.
Just don't do it. Just don't do it. It's too hard.
Too risky, yeah.
If you're originating notes, who are you originating notes with? They're not homeowners.
They're homeowners. Okay. I said I had somebody do all the underwriting. I pay them to do the underwriting.
So there's companies out there that will do all of
And
that
Like
for
a
you.
broker.
And in one instance, the underwriter said these people can't afford this note. So I went back to them and said, hey, they said, got it in writing, that you can't afford this note. You still want to buy the property? And they said,
Yes.
they said yes. I said, okay, then you have to write down that I know and understand that I do not understand, in their own handwriting, okay, that I've been told that I cannot afford this loan and that I may lose the house as a result of it. I am willing to go forward, even though.
Now they can't say they're a victim.
I believe in the Crocodile Dundee way of doing things. He told Wally tells everybody it's out in the open. No problem. So I want everybody to know everything.
Full disclosure of everything stops major headaches later from people.
Okay, I
saying
don't
they know.
always share the fact with everybody that I have the 25% interest in the future value. I don't.
Might scare some people away real quick, huh?
People don't need to know my business.
Don't show the whole movie, just show the individual slides.
There you go. So go ahead.
Anybody interested in buying commercial? Okay. Commercial notes are almost exactly the same. You don't value the properties the same way. So you have to be very, very knowledgeable on that end. Because multi-family is valued one way, commercial is done another way, industrial is yet another.
I even go so far as when I'm lending to investors, I have a page in there, a disclosure saying that this is for commercial purposes only. This is for investment purposes. If you were to occupy this house, this loan wouldn't be being made. That's part of the requirements, so that way, I don't know if one of my investors is going to try to move to Tennessee. I had people buy houses thinking, oh, I might have a vacation home in Tennessee. I'm like, no, you're not going to have a vacation home in Tennessee. It's things like that, that I want to be very careful about. So, when you're dealing with researching and analyzing these notes and trying to document your own homework on this, what kind of technology is out there? What kind of resources or data sites do you go to when you're trying to analyze these things to determine if it's the right fit for you?
I like to use local sources, but go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just, because we go nationwide. I was just looking at the note in Phoenix or Tucson yesterday, first mortgage, and when I look at Zillow just to get an idea of what their saying value is the property listed or not? That's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I looked at Google and I kind of zeroed in on those property, you can get a front view picture of the property. You can see what's sitting in the driveway, what the neighborhood looks like. You can rotate around and look at it. And it turned out that this particular property was kind of in a semi-industrial area. There was a lot of commercial buildings around it. There was a railroad yard over here. And it just was undesirable to me. And I also look at like Property Radar. It's a site that I subscribe to that keeps track of all the foreclosures going on. And used to be called Foreclosure Radar, now it's called Property Radar. But it gives you a lot of data. And I Google the homeowner and the property.
Is that nationwide? Also, Property Radar?
No,
or is it just
no.
California.
West Coast.
It does
Okay.
5 states: Nevada, Arizona.
Okay.
And there's nothing like that, but it does cover Arizona.
Okay.
I Google everything. A lot of times you can see stuff on Realtor.com or Redfin or Trulia, if the house is listed or not. And then I Google the homeowner. I Google the property address. Sometimes I've found where there was a police raid. There was a drug raid on that exact address.
Huh.
So I don't want to buy a house that's a meth lab.
Right.
I don't want to buy anything. So you want to know as much as you can. You want to be a private detective, basically. You want to find out as much as you can about the homeowner, the neighborhood. I look at City Data as a website, City-Data, that shows you what the crime statistics are, the average median income. If the median income is $20,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, oh, this is a depressed area.
Mm-hmm.
How would I ever sell that property if I got it back later on? And I don't like buying stuff in very remote areas. I was looking at something in Paradise, California. You know where that is?
Middle of nowhere.
Out in the middle of nowhere. It's in the foothills of the Sierras, kind of northeast of Sacramento, but in just a very low population area. I'm like, nah, I don't want that, And then we also subscribe to a service called Microbuilt that is like a skip tracing service. So I can find out information. I pay $100 a month or $130 a month to use that service. It's a pay service, but it tells me a lot of information about the homeowners and relatives and who lives in the house. And I always want to know, is it a rental or is it owner occupied? That makes it a difference.
Could you repeat that, please?
Which one?
Which one?
The last one that you pay.
Microbuilt?
Oh, microbuilt.
It's MICROBILT. But you don't want to use that unless you're planning on getting into notes.
I was going to say, that's a business. That's for when you have the business.
It's for a business. Yeah, it's $135 a month minimum. Every month you have to pay that fee.
You want to go and pull title and things like that and get a title search if you're really looking at a note in detail, looking at all
And we
the
do that also.
information.
We subscribe to a company called Black Knight Financial, and we pay again another $150 a month to them to be able to pull title reports on properties around the United States. So because we have a business, we subscribe to some different services that we need to do our due diligence on notes.
Okay, now, I'll go on the other side. I've done notes throughout the country too, and I still have done, so. I found it is very reasonable for me to find a good realtor in the area and have them provide me all the information. For 50 to 100 bucks, they'll provide me everything, and then I can go on the internet and check it. And that's really easy. And I always make them aware that if I get this property, they're going to represent it.
Sure.
And they can provide all the information he said from an MLS type data source, from wherever they are. And that has worked really, really well. By the way, and I when I'm looking for the realtor, I'm looking for one I ask the board of realtors who are the most successful ones, and then I want to check who's been doing it for a long time.
Absolutely key.
Yeah, the difference is, we're bidding on 50 notes right now. I got a pool of 20 and a pool of 25, and then some single notes. And so we don't have really time to get on the phone and call realtors and talk to them and wait for the realtor to take a day or two to get back to us. And
You need staff to analyze it immediately.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, we got to turn this stuff around quickly. Get the prices out.
Okay, big business, small business.
Retired off cash flow.
Exactly. Doesn't need to work.
At the same time, I do the same thing on the single family side, and it's a business, and so there's overhead that goes with that business. I'm sure if Gerald fired everybody right now, he could probably retire off the cash flow too. It's just going a different level with it as well, so, don't get me wrong. It's a hard thing going with overhead and going bigger versus staying slow and doing one thing at a time and one step at a time and actually focusing on key notes that you want and the specific ones, so I think it's a different mentality involved, which there's something to be said about about both. He probably has an awesome work-life balance comparatively to running a business and having employees and things like that, which is it causes it takes your time away, really does.
Look at the difference though. His hair's still dark, mine's not.
Only my hairdresser. Is that Clairol or something?
There you go. Nice. So, we're going to finish it off with that. Can anybody have any questions they'd like to answer?
What's the tax benefits for owning a note versus the actual rental property? I know out of owning the real estate, you can write off the expenses, depreciation, but what benefits?
You don't get that on the note. You're only claiming the interest portion of that note based on your amortization schedule, based on your purchase price. So you have an amortization schedule for the coupon rate and an amortization schedule for your purchase price based on what you bought it for, and so you're claiming interest based on your amortization schedule, which is different than the other amortization schedule. But there's no depreciation benefits. There could be, if you do seller financing and you have a gain built into that, you could have an installment sale, which you're only paying income tax on the portion of the note that you collect that's attributable to your profit on the sale of that property. So it's a strategy to pay that off over time. So that's pretty much the only thing that I can think of, at least right now, on the tax side that is substantially different.
On the tax side, I don't give tax advice, ask him.
And I don't do taxes anymore, so
Yeah, interest on a note there's no self-employment tax on it.
Yeah, that's good too.
It's passive. It's a passive.
So you can use the IRA for that then?
Oh yeah. Notes in an IRA are wonderful.
Well, and on the tax side too, if you're buying property in an IRA, then a lot of times you leverage inside your IRA, and that portion can be taxable, the part that you leverage. In a note situation, you could leverage a note too and have the same problem. Most of the time, most people pay cash for notes.
Done properly, an IRA is a great vehicle for investing in defaulted delinquent notes. If you have the capital to come up with any problems, because if you have a major payoff, then your taxes, the IRA would be taxed when you withdraw it, or if it's a Roth, it's not taxed.
Right.
And but
I was just going to say, last year I just got through doing my taxes yesterday, and my non-taxable IRA income for last year was about $80,000.
and you want to be, I personally think that a 401k is better than an IRA when investing, primarily because you can use debt in a 401k that you're not taxed on versus an IRA, you're taxed on the debt portion that you borrow. And a 401k doesn't have that rule, so you can borrow as much money as you want. So if you want to go hypothecate notes or sell off a piece of that note or collateralize, you can borrow and really ramp up your 401k benefits, including Roth IRA is probably one of the best strategies to use because then you can really leverage and get things going. So,
Would you guys like an idea of source of notes
Yeah.
that I see one coming, and I know he already knows about it? There are a lot of people out there with a lot of money looking for investment vehicles, and they're making bad loans right now. So just contact people who've made loans in the past 18 months.
You mean
Private parties.
mortgages?
Private parties, I'm sorry.
Oh, private parties.
Private parties who've made loans in the past 18 months, because probably half of them screwed up.
If they're not recording, where did you find them?
They better, hopefully better be recorded.
County Recorder's Office.
Some people don't record.
If they don't record them, then they really don't have secured debt.
They have to record them.
Right?
all right, guys. Well, I'm sorry. I've got to cut it off right now because we're supposed to be out of this room. Thank you guys very much for the
May
time
I say
today.
one last thing? I have a real estate
Oh
club.
yeah, please.
It's called LA RIA. Our next meeting is next Wednesday. If you're interested in going, we have some people who have already been to the meeting. I have flyers, and if it's the first time to our meeting, you can come for free.
What is this? Where is it? What's
Where is
the-
it? It's up by Pasadena.
And then Gerald has one as well, right?
Yeah, I have one more announcement too. Is a couple things. I have a note meeting at my office in Garden Grove. It's called Note Pros. We meet once a month. I've got to move it to the. It's right now. It's on the
Same day.
second Wednesday, the same day as his club, but I'm going to move it maybe this week.
And when he moves it, I probably start attending.
And then we also have this event coming up in Palm Springs. When is Andy's event?
May
It's the end of May, right? 27?
27th. It's like the fourth weekend.
But get
20, 21, and 22, something like that?
if you don't have my business card,
What?
talk to me after the
28th,
meeting.
29th, I think.
I can
Yeah.
tell you right now.
If you guys email me, I will send you guys links to both of their clubs
Yes.
on Meetup, so that way you guys have that. And then we also have some flyers in the back for some upcoming events as well. So, but if you send me that, I'll definitely.
19th, 20, 21.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I have the flyers. If you just wait, I'll pull them out. If you
All right.
want to come to my meeting.
Thank you guys very much.